I really wanted to go ahead and move forward and share a little bit about Biz Technology Solutions. Biz Technology Solutions was formed 20 years ago by two brothers, Retta and Mike Shapani. They built Biz Tech into a family business. And when I say that, all of our employees feel like family. And they've done that in creating a partnership with businesses to ultimately support, manage, and streamline their IT. So I like to share with people, we can pilot, co-pilot, or passenger that journey with you. And so in doing that, we really want to ultimately allow you to focus on what's important and align and offer some strategy in order to help build and grow and be successful ultimately. Today we have Retta Shapani. Retta is one of our co-founders. And Retta, a little bit about yourself. Do you want to introduce yourself briefly?
Yes. My name is Retta Shapani, co-founder of Biz Tech, and been in the tech industry for about 22 years in a number of different roles, everything from a developer, IT person, consultant, things like that. In recent years, I've been spending a lot of time with clients, identifying opportunities for them to align some of their technology with their business needs, and that seemed to be quite a bit of fun there. But yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Okay, and then our other guest today is Darian Pastursky. Darian, share a little bit about yourself as well, please.
Hi there. I've spent 30 plus years in IT and business leadership roles, almost all of them in the digital space, and found that I spent a lot of my time negotiating the gray areas and gaps between business leaders and their internal IT partners and their external technology vendors. And so that's provided me with a pretty unique perspective. And so now I work with clients to help them figure out how to optimize their IT organizations, turn things around, and achieve significant business goals.
And so today we're hoping to just really have more of a discussion. This is a roundtable, kind of an insight into both from a provider, but also as a consumer of all of the different things technology. So today, uncertain times provide a unique opportunity to rethink normal business operations. And so we're all faced with that, there's the cliche of do less with more, but I don't know that it's ever been more true as we're facing with the reality of remote working. How do we manage and maintain and grow our business, but also our people and relationships? So go ahead and let's talk a little bit about our first topic. A little bit about emerging trends. So really wanting to kind of get that point of view from both Retta and Darian as it relates to what are you seeing out there right now as emerging trends?
So I think from a technology perspective, as you consider, all the trends that we were anticipating this year in terms of trends versus what actually did occur, there's certainly a number of items that have been reshuffled in the list of priorities for many folks. Obviously, dealing with COVID-19 and the pandemic, and a lot of companies sending their employees home to work remotely, that actually really accelerated the adoption of a number of technologies that relate to communication and collaboration. I know that was generally kind of a slow adoption for most companies in the past, but all of a sudden this year we have seen that become one of the top priorities that folks have as they were considering a lot of the technologies available to them for this year. Another interesting one is really contactless and paperless solutions. And I think we see that quite a bit. I know when I go to the grocery store or when I purchase some of the things, I no longer hand my card over Chick-fil-A drive-thru, right? They either do the contactless purchase, or they hand you the reader and you slide the card yourself. And that change of behavior for a lot of businesses out there including service industry, everybody is using a tablet of some sort or some sort of small portable device to eliminate the need of either paper or simply contacting or touch with anything. So that one was also another area that we've seen a tremendous adoption of some of those technologies. Distant learning was probably another area that, just simply put, you have a lot of new products and tools out there going, from collaboration tools, communication tools, either mobile solutions. Then you are expecting to ensure that a lot of these end users of these technologies or consumers of it to know how to use it. And how do you handle that when you have, in some companies, all their employees are working remote, whether it's a few hundreds or a few thousands if you're a large organization. So the adoption of learning management systems or LMS platforms has also seen an uptick in terms of usability in general by many companies as the vehicle to basically share content, training material, SOPs, things like that to folks that are set up remotely. I would say another one, which I believe between the collaboration and communication, this is probably just as important and is on top of the list, is security. And specifically, the new type of security approach that a lot of IT decision makers and administrators are really adopting these days is the AI infused or artificial intelligence infused tools that can actually detect and protect against the different threats, whether it's some hacker that's attempting to slowly gain access to the environment. And they're going to start small, right? They're going to start from sending a link to somebody within the organization. And after that link is clicked, they will gain access to their credentials. And from there, they may try to slowly gain access to the network. And from there, they will access backup, servers, all sorts of things, and create chaos. And obviously that is already causing billions of dollars to companies worldwide. So adopting intelligent threat detection tools and more modern security tools is the new way of basically detecting these things by really analyzing a lot of the user activities and looking for anything that's abnormal or unusual. And you do that through intelligent software. And then, of course, reacting to it. And the last two really, and I don't combine them, but we could in some use cases where we find the use of artificial intelligence with smart devices. And the use of, for example, AI when we're using a smart speaker, Alexa, or even Siri. And again, those are technologies that are actually leveraging artificial intelligence. When you start looking for how they're being applied today in the marketplace, AI is used to analyze financial data, create predictive models to understand where, let's say, the market is going to go in terms of either stocks or just general company trying to assess the overall sentiment of their consumers and look for patterns. And that's a general good use of AI in applications in different industries. The IoT, or Internet of Things, and this is likely to really touch on a lot of the small devices that we see out there. If we take healthcare as an example, a smart device could be a glucose sensor that can monitor 24/7 the sugar level on a patient who's diabetic. And that IoT device connects to their provider and sends alerts to let them know that, hey, these levels are getting near critical. This patient needs a follow-up from you. Another example of a sensor is we've seen sensors being installed in elevators. And basically their job is to communicate back to the service company that, hey, there's some parts in this elevator that are either near end of life where they're going to cause issues if you don't replace them, like belts and things like that. Or generally speaking, hey, there's some errors in the system and the elevator needs to be serviced. So a lot of these are some of the technologies that we're seeing out there. But I think one thing, as Darian had talked about in the past, is where's that human factor? And it'll be interesting to see her take on some of these technology trends and what she sees out there that are also relevant areas to consider.
So I think I'm seeing the same things from a technology perspective. I think from a human perspective, there are a number of things. I think IT organizations are a bit overwhelmed right now. They're trying their best to keep up with day-to-day priorities. They're finding themselves in the middle of an accelerated dependence on internet providers and bandwidth that can't necessarily keep up with the increased demand because of remote work. And so they're having a very difficult time focusing on anything but the day-to-day operations and support. And now going into planning season, I think what a lot of companies are starting to struggle with is how to predict in a very unpredictable time what they need to be doing over the course of the next 12 to 18 months. This is a time when the combination of IT and business conversations, goals, and collaborations can actually have a lot more impact on the outcome than perhaps a traditional year where you have projects that you're just going to carry over, you know what you're going to carry over, you know what you're going to focus on for maintenance. You have 2 or 3 or 4 major business goals, and those may or may not be discussed with IT before they're established, and then IT provides a support plan for those. This year, IT needs to rethink how it works and how it provides its services. And the business needs to have that dialogue with IT because many businesses are having to rethink how they deliver their goods and services as well. From a human perspective, one of the biggest things that I think we're beginning to see is the collapse of the informal network. I think most IT and business folks within organizations will nod when I say that a lot of very, very important information for IT comes from informal interactions with business partners and colleagues. You're in the break room, you're in the hallway, you're in a meeting, and you happen to just be chatting. And that's how you find out that the manufacturing group is going to implement a new technology platform that you didn't know anything about, or that the sales organization really needs a new CRM platform and they're really struggling and trying to make a decision, but you didn't know. Those kinds of things, that kind of information over the years has played a much more significant role than I think people recognized in making IT effective. And so now, because people are not having those incidental connections, they're having to focus on more formal communications. And that hasn't been at the center of the competencies for IT organizations and their business partners in the past. And so now they're going to have to focus on that in order to come together and achieve the new business goals that are going to be required.
So a couple questions that I have just based on, the start of this conversation is, all of these things, the merging trends, how do they affect different sizes of businesses? So, is there something that smaller businesses, medium-sized businesses, larger-sized businesses are needing to or experiencing that is different? And then what are the similarities? What are commonalities between all of those types of businesses? Because, our clients, our friends, our community is built on, all different types of businesses, sizes, verticals. I mean, as it relates to that, what are your answers?
So I think from a people perspective, Melissa, the importance of relationships internally and externally is continuing to increase. And I think that's true of any organization of any size. I think smaller and mid-sized companies are increasing their dependence on external partners to provide cloud-based solutions and take on some of the functions and responsibility that internal staff in the past has tried to take on, because the internal people now have to take on more and more and do more and more. But I think the importance of relationships, how they're managed, how they're measured, how they communicate, how they're brought together to work together and collaborate to solve problems and provide services that cross lines between vendors. Those are things, at least that I'm seeing, that are common to all businesses, regardless of the size.
Yeah, it definitely, I mean, obviously, whether it's using from a technology perspective, kids at home are still, in some states or school districts, they're leveraging their laptops to do remote sessions. They're collaborating with their, schoolmates or their teachers. Small businesses are having to do the same thing with their clients and coworkers, the same as, large enterprise. It boils down to, if you consider some of the things that IT will have to be focused on, is the experience being a smooth one, and these tools must be really easy to use and adopt so that everybody feels comfortable with them, in hopes that they will not become an obstacle to maybe create some sort of, bridge a little bit of the gap between what they were used to with the human interactions face to face in the office, and now where a lot of those conversations are just happening virtually. So
Right. So transitioning to the next conversation, but real quick. So, it's so funny that this Q&A, what top 3 focus areas do you have going into planning? Not just that, but, just from a personal perspective, how do you filter the information? So I know right now, because we're all remote, because we're all facing new challenges, we're also facing, my inbox has 3 times as many opportunities to learn and educate and participate and all that. How do you advise, or how do you personally, what tunes you in and what tunes you out? How do you engage in this new conversation?
So I think everybody's still learning. I think for me personally, things that appear to be authentic, practical, realistic, those are the things, based on how they're presented, that tend to get attention. The other thing that is obviously going to get attention are matters that have a known high priority. Mm-hmm. So if I have a client that has an emergency, or somebody who has a problem, or someone who is facing a challenge, those things are going to rise to the surface. What that says, though, is that there's very real danger of getting caught up in the exact priority for fixing today's problem, which leaves less time for focus and thought around where we're going, where we should be going, how we should be tackling that. And that's actually going to be one of the problems, I think, facing businesses going into the planning season for next year. Everybody's a bit tired and overwhelmed with new and unprecedented patterns, but in reality, these are actually presenting some really exciting opportunities for doing things differently if we can find the time to work together, to take a step back, carve out some time to focus and plan. But that is, to your point, Melissa, very, very difficult when you're overwhelmed. Inbox, phone call, text, whatever may be the case, mm-hmm. Simply because everybody is scrambling to try to keep up with what is needed today.
Yeah, and I would have to say, there's one example that I would want to bring up, because ultimately you are getting exposed to a lot more tools, and content is, from email to chat messages to, different cloud files that are sitting somewhere in the cloud, to different applications. I want to go back to an example that probably one of the projects that I had the opportunity to work with Darian on is, as a technologist, I'm all about adopting new technology. It's all the fun stuff. Let's roll it out there and let's get everybody on it. And Darian would always remind me, Retta, what are you trying to solve for? Let's figure out again, exactly define what it's going to solve, and then roll out the pieces that are going to make the most sense, address the gaps or the needs. And then we can circle back to rolling out the new things. And I think this is really important for any of the IT executives out there and decision makers. Technology right now, you're getting thrown everything from ads about Zoom to Microsoft Teams to all these different products and solutions that can do everything and anything. Ultimately, you really want to narrow down the specific needs that you're trying to solve for, identify what product or products can address those gaps, and come up with a game plan that when you roll them out, users won't be overwhelmed with the sheer volume of information, digital information, to a point where they hate it, and they're going to feel like they're very, you know, incapable of keeping up with what's being thrown at them, and it will really leave a bad taste in their mouth where they're going to say, I want to go back to the office. So definitely something to be mindful of.
Absolutely agree.
Absolutely. So here's my last question as far as that goes. As far as adoption, right? When you're adopting these new technologies or looking at these emerging trends, because Rhett, I really like what you said. What are you solving for? Any nuggets around how to create an adoption strategy?
So I think one of the things that's important, and this is a theme for planning as well as major initiatives and trying to decide whether or not you should implement something new. There are always items kind of below the line on an IT plan that just have to be done, right? Security has to be managed, and hardware has to be refreshed, and servers have to be monitored, and all of those things that IT is fundamentally responsible for have to be handled. You set those aside. And now if you look at the initiatives and the challenges and everything, you really, if you go through an exercise where you identify the primary business goals in business terms, what problem is the business trying to solve and why, which is very important. What is the business trying to achieve and why and when, or by when? And then you start to line up underneath those business goals, those potential technology questions or opportunities or solutions, and work your way through them that way, narrow them down, and then you start to overlay the evaluation of the organization itself. So for example, in many of the projects that I've been involved with, we've gone through what we call a risk assessment or a change assessment of the targeted user group. How tolerant are they for change? How quick are they to adopt new technology? How bought in are they to a particular initiative? Is this exciting for them? Is it threatening for them? And once you understand that, the way in which you go about choosing a technology or solution to implement and then how you implement it changes, because sitting at the forefront of everything you do will be one or two or three things that you know are going to be critical success factors. Does it need to be simple? Does it need to be logical? Does it need to be sequential or fast? There will be one or two or three of those things that will rise to the surface with the user group. And if you focus on those and you focus on a business goal, then the technology that you implement will end up doing what it's supposed to do, and it will end up being very, very successful for the business and for IT. But IT organizations sometimes struggle with how to line up the technology pieces underneath business goals. So practicing that, planning season is a great time to do that, but practicing that alignment is huge in terms of helping to kind of weed through and eliminate things that really aren't necessary for consideration right now.
Any thoughts around that, Retta? And I know I kind of started with, you know, maybe I put the cart before the horse a little bit there as far as adoption, but, you know, just rewinding. So talking about, you know, the opportunity that's presented itself currently, talking a little bit about how do you assess those opportunities? Because sometimes change is viewed, and inevitably we're all changing. Sometimes change is viewed with a negative connotation, but how do you create opportunity and benefit around change with it, with regard to turning adversaries into allies? Or yes.
Well, I think there's two parts. There's two-part answer to that question. The first part is, which is very uncomfortable for a lot of folks in the IT circles, that they need to learn how to be a better salesperson. That's absolutely, they have to be able to articulate and sell their project, their idea, their need for funding. That's, you have to have that sense. You can't just assume that, hey, I need $100,000 for this project, and then you're told no, and then you walk away. Well, you're doing a poor job at selling it. So that's one part of it. The other part is you truly need to understand the business requirements and justify whatever that initiative is, because ultimately you as an IT individual have to do your homework to justify a technology solution, not only from the perspective of what is the true ROI of it, and have to be able to give some sort of measure. We understand that not everything can be measured, but ultimately you have to come with some sort of business justification. And part of that, you have to talk in business terms, meaning whatever your organization is. If you're in manufacturing and you're introducing a new product, talk in terms of yield. When you're in healthcare, talk in terms of reducing medical errors. When you're in the service industry, talk in terms of increasing productivity by reducing, inefficiencies. So that part is really, and it's a tough one too, because ultimately I'm guilty of it. I love computers. I geek out a lot. I like to play with equipment. My office is full of gadgets because I love that. But I also understand that when I'm sitting in front of an executive or a client or an end user, I truly have to describe whatever it is that I'm introducing in a black box in terms that they can actually relate to and understand, and see that, this is bridging a gap for me. It is helping me, or it will help me in my day-to-day. And the next part is it justifiable financially? Are the funds there? But I think that those are the two areas that anybody in the IT circle, if their responsibility is to bridge the gap and take advantage of the opportunity to improve things by introducing new things, then they need to be able to justify it. They need to be able to sell it well. So,
yeah,
that's life. That's life, man. Amen, brother. Okay, preach, Retta, preach. All right, Darian. So, talking about moving in from that opportunity, and what people talk about alignment all the time, but from a technology perspective, we're not just talking about the technology alignment. We're talking about the decision, the goals. What do you think about when you're thinking and you're discussing with your clients what alignment they need?
So when we talk about alignment, I generally start with very, very simple kinds of things, very simple conversations. So for example, IT tends to be somewhat insulated during the normal workday, right? Technology professionals come in, they always have more to do than they can possibly get done. They're busy doing it, they're busy fixing, they're busy building, they're busy supporting, they're busy doing all of the things that they're being asked to do. So one of the things that we talk about, and I challenge them on when I ask them about why they're doing what they're doing, why are they offering those services? When was the last time they talked to somebody in one of the business units that they service? It's really important that the human beings in IT understand that they need to communicate, they need to connect, they need to be partnering with the folks in their company to bring to realization the things a company needs from them. So one example in one of my positions, when I first took on the role of CIO, I asked the group who our competition was. I just wanted to see what their answer would be. And the IT staff immediately, hands shot up in the air, everybody, IBM, Hewlett Packard, Intel, Dell, those were all competitors. Well, as it turns out, we were in a consumer product space as a company, but that IT organization had been so insular and so focused on being IT, they actually saw themselves as their own entity. And so we embarked on a transformation initiative to reconnect the people in IT with the people in the business units that they serviced. They sat together, they spent time together, they talked about problems and shared problems and solutions. The IT folks spent time with their business partners in business situations and vice versa. And it worked really well. And at the end of it, I was actually very gratified to see how motivated and passionate the IT folks were about making sure they were solving their partners' problems, because the people in business were real to them. And people in IT who really, by and large, didn't have numbers and names, were now very real to the business folks. And it made a huge difference. So a large part of my practice and what I do is focused on the human element of IT, because the quality of communication and judgment and decision-making and leadership often make the difference between a really good technology decision and a bad one. And so to me, alignment is about getting people to work together in a collaborative way to reach really specifically identified goals that they agree are the right ones.
So and that's such an interesting and awesome perspective, because you spent the majority of your career leading those internal IT processes and organizations. And Loretta, I just want to switch that a little bit, because oftentimes in a small to medium-sized business, they don't have an internal IT department. So the CIO is the CFO, is the CEO, or the owner. And so from an alignment perspective with those size and those types of businesses, where do you think that transition or that comes from? What needs to happen in that environment?
I think in those environments, you really want to rely on your partner to bring in to help bridge that gap. And what I mean by that is, for a lot of small businesses that are receiving IT services, many of them are basically having to deal with, the help desk, where they call and get IT support. But I think, it will be a mistake for those partners to solely rely on just the help desk and that's it, and call it a day. I think clients should demand to have an account executive as an example, or an account manager, because I truly think that, a lot of our success came from a lot of the value that an account manager adds to the client. Even though if they're technical, the fact that they can talk to an account manager that can speak in, general lingo without dropping some serious acronyms, IT acronyms to confuse them, that makes a big difference. And from that standpoint, the account manager / the account executive, in times of need, they can bring in a consultant that maybe needs to talk maybe about something a little bit deeper, that talks about an ERP system or a sales automation tool or a medical records platform. But for those folks, whether it's the CFO or the president of an organization that does not necessarily have any IT leadership, having the right partner can make a big difference. It can really make or break it for them, because in many occasions they could be missing out on opportunities to, fill some gaps around, some of the challenges that they may have, just simply because there's really nobody looking at it to say, you know what, I do see other clients in your vertical using this technology to solve that problem. And unless you have that conversation with somebody that is not the person fixing your printer or computer or stuck in a network closet, you're definitely going to miss out on it.
So transitioning back to Darian. So Darian, now bringing it all full circle, because, the reason that we are such good friends is because you've partnered with us before, using that internal opportunity and role in order to help do some of those things that Retta said. So not only tell us a little bit about what it looks like, and the other thing I want to ask you is, how is that role within that internal IT seat changing and evolving as it relates to partnerships?
So I think so. There are a couple key points here. First, picking the right partner is absolutely essential. You have to have someone that you trust, someone whose judgment you trust and respect, someone who has a ability to share with you the ownership of whatever challenge you're facing, and then bring options for solving it to the table. The dynamic has to be there, the communication has to be there. So fundamentally, on a human level, you need to have someone that you can truly collaborate and open up with and trust. I think in terms of the internal role, there are a number of things that are shifting. I think companies are realizing inherently they're not, most companies, unless you're in the tech space, are not IT companies. They're never going to be. And many of them, part of our title refers to it, see IT as a necessary evil, or they see something as, they see it as a very complex function, and they don't feel comfortable interacting with it because they see it as complex or confusing and expensive. And so a lot of IT organizations are looking now to shift a bit and not do as much internally, but to optimize the use of their internal IT staff to work with business partners, to project manage, to oversee partnerships, to work with cloud solutions and multiple partners who then provide the technical services and support services and maintenance that the company ultimately needs. It's a better way to scale. It's more practical and more affordable for small and mid-sized companies. So you're seeing a shift in the technology leadership, the IT leadership space, from someone who can sit behind a screen and code or configure to someone who understands that and has maybe been there and has that background, but actually has a very strong skill set around communication and management and facilitation of conversations between multiple parties to solve problems. You're going to have a technical environment. There are going to be issues. You're going to need someone internally to own the issue and help get it resolved. There may be triage, but there's going to be a lot of communication. So now suddenly the IT leaders have got to be able to communicate and facilitate and understand how to make really good decisions there. I think it's a foregone conclusion for larger companies that have more staff and have more layers of IT leadership, but small and mid-sized companies often haven't had those skills because they focus their resources and their money on the IT folks who can do, who can fix, who can build, who can diagnose. And so now I think companies, as they look to change the mix with their partners, are finding that the way they manage the partners and communicate and work with partners requires a different set of human skills, soft skills.
So that kind of leads us to our next topic. Things changing. How is the planning process going to be different this year for small to medium-sized business and also internal IT departments from previous years? What's that look like? And so, what have we done traditionally and what are we going to do going forward?
So traditionally, and I think, Reddy, you'll probably agree, traditionally, the business reviews the previous year's performance. Did they meet goals? Did they not meet goals? They define what the financial objectives for the upcoming year or two need to be. They put together some high-level objectives around new products or new services or new markets, or expansion or growth or right sizing. And so they've done all that and they've had all those conversations. And then at some point, the IT leader gets an email that says, your budget will be due by October 1st. Here are the budget guidelines. we want you to come in the same as last year or 15% lower than last year. And we have a series of things that we need. So put a plan together and come back to us with how we're going to make all that work. And so it's very much a volleyball, not overly collaborative. And IT has come in traditionally more toward the end of that conversation. I think now businesses are having to rethink their business models given everything that has recently happened. That means IT has got to understand how they're going to support all those changes, and IT needs to change how it works too. So this is an opportunity, the way I see it, for IT to reach across the aisle, for IT to initiate earlier conversations with the business leaders to have these discussions around what are they thinking, what are they planning, what do they need, what's going to have to change, what do they need to preserve. You just can't assume going into next year that you're just going to do things the way you've always done them, because that's rapidly becoming obsolete. So for IT to reach out and have these earlier conversations, now what happens in a very open environment where IT is perceived well enough to have these conversations, they can yield tremendous results. You have a very open discussion with business people talking about what's difficult and what they need and what they haven't been able to do and what they've heard and what they've seen and what they think they need and what solutions they think they need to implement. And then you have your IT partner talking through all of that. And did you think about this? And did you think about that? And did you know that this thing that you really, really, really want to implement is going to wind up costing you 4 times what you thought it was when you really implement it correctly? But there are other solutions that we can bring to the table and look at that might meet your needs. As that happens, now IT has the opportunity to bring some options and solutions to the table. The business gets to see what those are. And together, you make a decision about which ones you think you're going to pursue. And that becomes the basis of some of these new objectives, of these new initiatives going into the new year. This is a very different approach than traditional IT providing a passive plan to support things that are predefined.
So really IT is more of a driver in the discussion now more than ever, right?
Well, I think they have the opportunity. The business drives what's done and why it's done, and it always should. That's why IT exists, to enable business to achieve its business goals. But in this case, IT can take an expanded role by reaching out and trying to have these conversations and offering to have these conversations and bring something of value earlier in the process. I think that reflects well on the IT leaders, providing you have the right leaders to have that conversation. And I think it allows the business to understand more about what goes into these decisions earlier, which also is a benefit to both business and IT.
Retta, what are you saying?
I was going to add, and I think Darian alluded to that, is IT has to bring some of these ideas and challenge the status quo. And I think it takes a very special kind of IT leadership to be able to deliver on that is not always available out there. And it is what it is in terms of not every organization has an opportunity to have strong IT leadership, and that's just a reality that some companies, unfortunately, it could be a cultural thing where IT is looked at as just as an expense to keep the lights on, and no, we don't want to hear from their ideas, and then you have your IT management team just sitting there and not interested in really doing anything different. Other places, including when I worked with Darian, is challenge the status quo. Is there a better way of doing this? Can this result in improved efficiencies, reduction of costs, or improved revenues? Are there better ways to increase the value of our services? Can we tie some sort of technology to it? And these are things that it certainly will challenge IT leaders out there to also look in the mirror and see, are they part of the solution in terms of coming up with ideas that align with the business and provide value to the business? just because you can buy the fastest piece of equipment in the world that hums in a server closet and has flashing lights that go around, and you have LEDs and all these fun things, doesn't mean that it's going to add a cent to the bottom line whatsoever. It takes folks that can, in manufacturing, look at the production floor and identify efficiencies, or ask, why do we have 3 people around a computer instead of walking around with wireless devices? Why do we have physicians doing this when they can sit at their desk and cater to their patients remotely from home and still increase the volume of patients that they can help without having a patient sit in the waiting room for an hour that we all hate, right? But if we're there for a 5-minute check-in, I don't want to drive to the practice and sit there for an hour for a 5-minute checkup. I can do it from my phone. And again, these are ideas that generally we want to see more IT folks bring up and have this conversation with their organization, but also for the small business side of the house, partners that are not afraid to propose things to their clients. And of course, the main got you there is, you don't want it to propose things just because you think it's going to make the quota. You want to propose things that actually matter and make a difference. And again, it's a key differentiator for some IT vendors versus others is, what do they really put in front of the clients? And are they talking in terms of helping them use by leveraging different things, or are they just putting things in front of them just because it's time to replace and upgrade?
Right.
Okay. So final thoughts. First thing I wanted to say is thank you to both of you, because this has been fun for me. I don't know about you guys, but I've had a darn good time. So it's been fun and educational. I mean, as the director of sales and marketing, I'm always looking to use my resources, 2 experts, to help educate me so that I can better in turn help educate our community. And so I really appreciate everybody being really open and honest in today's conversation. But what are your final thoughts from today?
I think for me, the one thing that I would encourage IT organizations to do, if you don't have regular business discussions, even if you don't have a large footprint, just talk to somebody in the business and understand a little piece of it. Get used to it. Make that a part of what you do, because ultimately I think that can add some value for IT leaders. Pick your partners carefully, because when you pick really, really good ones, it's going to have a huge impact on what you do going forward.
What about you, Retta?
Final thoughts. I think Darian put it extremely well. I think for me, the way I look at it is, for any of the folks, the IT departments that may feel discouraged that, I've been doing this for years within this organization, it doesn't look like anybody wants to listen. It is certainly can seem, challenging, but ultimately it has to start from a place where you understand or get to understand the business well, and then identify the areas that you can help support and drive. There's certainly some priorities that will never go away, security being a critical one. And especially on the security side, probably maybe one of the most challenging ones, especially as we identify that some of the security solutions that are out there, some of them are not just software, some of them are education, and they will require more than just human capital or financial investment. They will require folks to be comfortable with change, folks that are willing to replace their or change their password every 30 days or 60 days, people to enter a code from their phone. And these are all uncomfortable things, but IT has to take the first step to really try to, highlight the importance in ways that the business users and the business leaders understand it and agree with it. Because if you're not able to do that, to persuade them why this is very important, whether it's security or adopting some sort of technology that will help the business, then I think it's time to maybe go and talk to your peers and find out what you can do different to get your point across to make sure you get their buy-in.
So any
Agreed.
questions from the audience, feel free to type in the chat, and we'll get to those. And then finally, I wanted to just draw everyone's attention to our transformational leadership guide. And, timing is everything. And I put a pop-up on here. The road to success is always under construction. And boy, isn't that the truth. So inside of our leadership guide, we're going to have an annual budget template and the secrets to choosing proper IT support and a service partner. So feel free to get access to that, download that for yourself. And then closing thoughts, as we move into the next phase of our transformational leadership series, really wanting to kind of unpack some of these things individually. So thank you guys. You've given us a lot to think about and reflect on, and to share, actually. So with that, I don't see any questions. We can wait a couple minutes if we'd like. Crickets. Bueller, does you remember that movie? Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Bueller. I think we're good. So without further ado, enjoy your Friday, and looking forward to the next one.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Thank you all. Bye.
Bye.